Me encuentro con la administradora del Programa de Naciones Unidas para el Desarrollo, la señora Helen, que nos visita en México con motivo del 50 aniversario de la existencia de este programa en nuestro país. It's a pleasure to have you in Mexico. Welcome.
Thank you.
Mrs. Clark. The 50th anniversary of the UNPD in Mexico, and well, we celebrate with an agreement, signing an agreement of cooperation. There was already a collaboration. How is it going to change with this agreement?
So our focus on Mexico for the last half century has been on working within Mexico, and that goes on. There's still a development journey here in Mexico to see through. But Mexico is also increasingly involved in sharing its own experiences and expertise with other countries through South-South cooperation. And with a number of the big emerging economies like Mexico, UNDP is now signing new agreements which see us cooperate not only at home but also offshore. So we certainly see great potential for example, sharing experiences on Mexico's democratic journey, successful social protection programs. There's any number of things where Mexico has a lot of experience to offer. And we are a global agency. We're a knowledge exchange, a solutions exchange, and cooperation with a country like this is very important to us.
You talk about democracy, and we are celebrating today the International Day of Democracy. How would you evaluate Mexican democracy nowadays?
Well, it's as if there's been another revolution in Mexico over the last couple of decades. So a lot has changed, and Mexico has freely elected legislatures at every level, and it puts a lot of effort, I think, into working to build the integrity of the institutions. But as the Secretary General said in his guidance note on democratisation, never take it for granted. We have to keep building, working on, improving our democracies. That applies to every country, and I think Mexico is serious about that.
One of the main concerns for Mexicans nowadays is security, with all this violence caused by the drug cartels, and people don't feel safe. How can this affect the progress of development?
It certainly affects it because, for a start, fighting crime is expensive. And every bit of money you have to put into that, of course, is money that can't go into your schools and your children and housing and health and infrastructure and everything else. And it also can be quite corrosive of institutions. Criminal syndicates always look for vulnerabilities in the state, whether it's in the police, the judiciary, the governments, wherever. So the sort of work UNDP does to help countries strengthen their institutions is very, very important, because in the end it's strong institutions and empowered communities which are going to tackle crime effectively together. I was Prime Minister of my country for 9 years. Crime, without question, was almost the most difficult issue you ever had to tackle. And certainly we weren't dealing with a problem anything like
some other Mexican issue. You were for 9 years the Prime Minister of New Zealand, and you did a very interesting job with indigenous people of your country. 10% of Mexican population is indigenous, and most of them are poor and not fully integrated. Give us a piece of advice. How can we work with that?
Well, in our country, around 15% of the population is indigenous people. And we work on a partnership model. We go back to a treaty signed between the British authorities and the Maori tribes of New Zealand in 1840. And that agreement transferred sovereignty to the British Crown, and now of course to the state of New Zealand. But it also wrote in protection for the rights of the indigenous people to their lands and their forests and their fisheries and their self-determination. Now, the challenge always is, how do you interpret that in a 21st century state? But what's evolved is very elaborate reconciliation models, models of consultation. Maoridom have a very big influence on the way policy is developed in New Zealand. And I think if you set out with that partnership model, that these are the first people in the country, respect the cultures, respect the languages, support opportunities so that you can start to get more convergence between the average living standard of the country and what the indigenous people experience, then with good faith you can find a way forward.
We haven't talked about climate change yet. Which are your main concerns in relation to this issue?
What I would like to see is more leaders step up, like President Calderon and the Foreign Minister, Espinosa, and show real leadership on the issue. There's no question that the Mexican state rescued the climate change talks last year in Cancun and got a result. Now, we need more leaders prepared to step out and take some risks and push the process forward, because the problems are dire and the need is urgent to get agreement and action on climate change. But the negotiations go round and round. So we just hope that the leadership Mexico has given will translate to more leadership in many places.
So Mexico is doing the job?
Oh,
or Mexican government is?
Without question, Cancun was a success when things looked bleak. Now we have to try and carry that through. I think for Mexico there's a huge opportunity to define itself as a sustainable nation. UNDP is talking with the Environment Minister about the low emissions development strategy, and we hope to be able to support that. Also the adaptation strategy. But I think Mexico as a big emerging economy could really be out there in front as a sustainable nation, and with the policies to back that. So that again would be leadership which Mexico can take into the G20 process when it chairs next year, and really be supporting the lead up to Rio +20 in Brazil next June.
Finally, Mrs. Clark, you're a very powerful woman and you've fought for the women's rights. Yesterday, Mrs. Margarita Zavala let us know that 38% of the people working in Mexico are women, which is good, but we want our half. We want 50%, and we want to earn as much as men do, and we want to make decisions, because most of the women working nowadays in Mexico are obeying, not making decisions. What can we do about it? How do we work to achieve that?
I was fascinated to see that around 40% of female university graduates don't go into the formal workforce. So there's clearly an issue around how possible it is for women to pursue both work and family interests in Mexico. And what I would be looking at in this country is radically increasing the provision of childcare, because if both parents are going to be at work, people want to know that their children are properly looked after. I'd be looking at equal opportunities measures of various kinds, making sure that women have equal access to credit so they can build their own businesses, equal access to business mentoring, equal access to skills and vocational training. I think that there's a lot of practical things that can be done, and some of them will be being done to some measure, but to really make the big breakthrough for women, I think focusing on how it is possible to both have a family life that's satisfying and rewarding, and a work life which is developing one's potential. That's the difficult question to crack.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Helen Clark, for your time. Are you still staying in Mexico?
Sadly, I have to return to New York, but
today, because we have a great party going on
and
tonight.
I would love to be there
today.
at midnight in the Zocalo.
Okay, hopefully next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.